is.
There it is. Okay. All right.
All right. Yep.
A little delay here. Hi, thanks so much for inviting me on to present, but also just having the foresight to get involved with RareX. I'll explain a lot about RareX, but real quick, an introduction of myself. So my name is Tom Hume. I do marketing for RareX. I actually come from a career of doing marketing with a lot of big name brand electronic companies, but it's kind of in my second career now. I'm working on the nonprofit side and working with rare disease, and basically because I'm no stranger to rare disease like you, my wife and I, we started a foundation called the Cure JM Foundation 20 years ago. JM stands for juvenile dermatomyositis, so it's in the autoimmune space. So I have a child with JVM or JM, and I'm really pretty typical of everybody at RareX. So we all have a real strong stake in rare disease, either directly with a child or with a family member or associates that we work closely with. So I'm going to go a little bit about what RareX is, just to give you a sense of what we do and why we do it. But then also I'll get into very specifically the data collection program itself and how we will roll this out to basically the whole NARS1 community, and what we hope that you guys will get as far as data coming back, the kinds of data coming back. I have to say I'm really impressed with the level of researchers and clinicians that you have on this call already. That's you guys are way ahead of the game compared to a lot of other groups. So I'm just going to cover really quick a little bit about RareX, and then just really take you through the journey of how to use the data collection portal itself. So what is RareX? We're a nonprofit, and we were created, Nicole Boyce, who started RareX, she also started Global Genes. RareX was kind of spun off as a concept to really show proof of concept to get it built, and now we're actually merging back with Global Genes at the beginning of the year. But we are a nonprofit that's created really a platform to help patient or enable patient communities like yours to collect data and to connect that data and to share it with researchers worldwide. RareX itself does not own or sell or do specific research ourselves with the data. It's really for researchers throughout the world who can tap into this, basically a cloud of rare disease data. And it's not just going to be for NARS1. What's nice about it is it'll look across multiple rare diseases, because what we found in rare disease, while we're rare, we're not always so rare that there aren't connections between different rare diseases, and especially about treatments and phenotypes. So what RareX is not, we're not a replacement for any current research you're doing or clinically sponsored patient research you're doing. We're kind of a supplement in many ways. Maybe that data can help validate some of the work that your researchers are already doing. And just real quick, what's our model? How do we even exist as a nonprofit? We get money from grants. We also get money from pharmaceutical companies, because they don't want to get into the business of data collection and housing patient registries and that kind of stuff. But they want to have access to the de-identified data that is available, so they can recruit for clinical trials and have other findings too. So that's how we're built, and we're basically disease agnostic, but we are focused on all rare diseases. So why did the NARS, or Roy Bell team really look to RareX? Well, one is it's a worldwide data collection, and we meet all ethical governance standards that are required. So we handle through, we have an IRB, we handle all the consent requirements, we handle all the technology of privacy. And as we build it out, you'll discover as I'm going through this, we're English only right now, mostly US based, but that's rolling out to other countries as we get GDPR compliant for each of those countries. GDPR compliance has to do with basically privacy rules within countries. So, but that doesn't mean that anybody who has an internet connection can't access the RareX database and start putting data into it. There's no cost to patients, patient organizations, or researchers to participate with RareX. And basically, this is what's very unique about RareX. You own the data that you put in that you dictate who gets to see the data. There's a very specific sharing survey that's part of RareX, and you could say, theoretically, you could say, gosh, I want to give my data to an institutional researcher, but I don't want to give it to big pharma, or so you allow kind of the degree of sharing of your data. And when I talk about data, it's always de-identified, meaning there's no identifiers as to who the patient is or any contact information of who the patient is. So, but the value of it is one of the researchers mentioned, is there's the volume of this data is so low, and when you can combine it all, then you can start to see patterns across patients throughout the world. So that gets to the last point, and basically it just helps speed up research and drug development, which is the big reason why NARS team got involved with it. So what are the patients for the patients themselves, though? Well, one, we'll provide some data back to the organization. And at the very end of this, I'll go to some examples of how some of that data we provided back to a rare disease organization, and how those parents actually use that data to go to their doctors to say, hey, look, many of the children in this particular rare disease are on the autism spectrum. Can I go ahead and get tested for it? That type of thing. So there'll be benchmarks of information back to you, but then also the benefit, of course, to the end patient is the possible chance to participate in clinical studies, which this RareX helps make those connections. Okay, so I'm going to jump into what really kind of the process of the flow of getting logged in. So what do you need to get started? It's super easy. You're just going to need an email address. You're going to create your own password. We recommend the browsers of Google Chrome, Apple Safari, or Microsoft Edge. Don't use Internet Explorer, which I think Microsoft has stopped supporting anyways, or Mozilla Firefox. And it would be helpful. There's an opportunity to upload a genetic report. So if you have an electronic version of that to upload, have that kind of ready to go too. This is sort of the steps, and even this, everything I'm going to go through is going to make it seem more complicated. Make it seem more complicated than it is. Once you are actually in it, it actually moves pretty quickly. But you're just going to register for an account. We have a terms of use for the website. We have an informed consent. We have a data sharing preference agreement, and then you're going to also fill out something on demographics. And that's just for our data. And how people are using it, the demographics piece. You're going to add as a caregiver, you're going to put in your information, but then you're going to put in your child's information. You're going to do a complete health and development survey. We call this sort of the head to toe survey. And this is what triggers other deeper surveys that you will get. So if you say, yes, there are vision issues, that'll trigger a whole set of level 2 surveys about those particular vision issues. Or if you have skin issues, they'll trigger that. If you don't have that, or if you say, I don't know, you'll still have the chance to answer those level 2 surveys too. You'll upload your child's genetic report, and then you'll basically complete the level 2 surveys that are put into your dashboard, and I'll explain that shortly. So, how do you get started? Well, you could either, you go to the Rory Bell website, and through the navigation, there's a drop down, there's a link that'll get you started and over. And you could link to join up with RareX. What you're going to do is hit that link. You'll end up at, this is the community page for NARS1. So this is really what we kind of call the front door. This is the way to get into the data collection program itself. This page does have some translation, but it's more of a Google translations. And this page also has a whole section of Q&A that if you want to go understand deeper about this data collection program, about what's involved, about why to participate, about any of the privacy or security issues that you might be concerned with. Then the first time you'll log in, this is a two-step verification process. You'll note, that, of course, that you're over 18, and that you'll pick whether you're in the United States or outside the United States. This is more just to be really upfront and from a consent standpoint, because if you're outside the United States, you're coming to this understanding that we may not be fully GDPR compliant in your particular country because we're still rolling that out. And you'll check the box probably as a caregiver or a participant. We also have the capability for many rare diseases. It's the patient themselves who's logging in. We also have a situation where the caregiver, the patient themselves passed away. So that's that third box: person lost a loved one for the rare disease. So again, this is just a very simple verification process. You'll do, you'll fill that out. You'll get this email back that'll give you a link to go create a password. If you don't seem to find it, you can check your spam or junk folder, but it seems to come through pretty well for everybody. And then you'll go through a verification where you'll enter your email address. You'll be sent a verification number. You will, to your email address, you'll add that verification number, and then you'll start building out your password. Again, very, very common two-step. And then you're ready to start. So you get to your login page, you'll put in your email address and the password you just created. The next part you'll come to is a matrix terms of use. Now, RareX has a whole terms of use. Matrix just happens to be the technology sort of interface we're using. But so you're welcome to view that whole terms of use. But basically, everything that's important to know is within the RareX terms of use, everything is to reinforce that you own your data, that we do not own your data, and that so that's really it. That's the biggest parts to it, and goes through some of our security. Then as you get into it, we'll talk about this more. So sometimes the term registry is used, and often you guys are using that term. We call it a data collection program, just so when you see it in any documentation on the data collection program, it's referred to as the DCP, or data collection program itself. As you start going through the informed consent, it's written in a way, we decided to write in a question and answer sort of format. So you'll understand a little bit about as you're consenting, what you're consenting to. You can always click that learn more button, and it has an even broader answer to the question that's provided above. Again, you'll probably be starting out as the patient and caregiver in this, so you'll be checking that box. And then you'll also answer other questions like the ability to follow up, a researcher to follow up with you. Oh, well, I'm sorry, these at the very bottom here just allow us to even start collecting the data on the aggregate to share back to the organization themselves. But then there's also the option for, if you would qualify for a clinical study, you could check yes. That doesn't mean that you're signing up for the clinical study. It just means that a researcher working through RareX would come to us. They would say, we've identified these patients, and we'd like to approach them for a clinical study, at which point we would work with the organization to find out your interest. Also within the informed consent then too, you're going to get into filling in information about your child's name, and some details too about the parent. This is all within just allowing consent to use. The biggest thing here is sometimes there's people have their computers set to autofill. Just make sure that you're filling in exactly what it's asking you to fill in. We collect demographic data on both the parents or caregivers and the children themselves. Again, this is partly for our understanding about just use of the platform, and could be used possibly for policymakers and things like that down the road. But again, it's all de-identified when that data is provided out. And then you'll get down to where you're actually choosing the disease. This is actually a screen grab from a different one, but you would see NARS1 as in the dropdown to choose. And then you get into the sharing survey. Now, there's a lot of options here, and we do that just to be fully transparent and give you full choices. Our strong recommendation, though, is that you just simply check general research and leave it at that. You don't check anything else. The reasoning is general research would allow the greatest number of researchers to see the data. And that could even be a citizen scientist, it could be a statistician, it could be somebody who's not necessarily in simply a biomedical research role, but even a broader research role who's trying to find interesting trends with the data. So we highly recommend choosing general research. You can narrow it though, and if you narrow it, it's just less researchers will give a chance to see the identified data that you're putting in here. So these are other options, but these are also fully make it more restrictive. So as I gave that example, it's like, well, I don't want any of my data to go into big pharma. Well, you could check here, but again, this is all de-identified data. It's all going to be helping the whole community. So strongly recommend just hit that general research button. You'll have an opportunity to share things that we aren't doing yet. This is a little bit of future proofing on our part when we have the capability to do this within RareX. So we'll ask you, do you know if there are biological samples that you've provided somewhere to a research study? And then we ask if you're interested in collecting biosamples. It could be saliva, it could be bodily fluids. We're not collecting that today, but it's just something that we might do in the future. And so we ask now if you would have an interest. Same goes for electronic medical records. Right now, we do take genetic tests reports. We're not taking full electronic medical records. There's a lot of requirements to de-identify that data, if you can imagine, if you upload that. But we might be doing it in the future. And then we ask about other studies that you've been involved with. And we'll even ask, what those studies were, if you would have an interest in connecting the data from those studies. Now, those studies might have a whole different consent capability, but if there was enough interest in connecting to a piece of research that's already out there to the RareX data, we can make that happen in the background. You'll have an option here if you want to share your contact information. Now, this is basically your name and email only. This is if you want to share it with a patient advocacy group like Rory Bell. So this is the only time that there'll ever be identified data. And if you consent to yes, we would make your name and email available to a patient advocacy group itself. And let me keep going. So at this point, you'll get to where you're going to be basically adding the patient, in most cases, the child. So you'll see in that upper left corner, Brittany Lane, that's a caregiver. Brittany completed all of her caregiver demographics and consents. Now she's going to add the child. So she clicks the add patient button. And then she does a similar process. And the navigation is interesting because you can always see, while you might be, in this case, Marilyn Lucas, filling this stuff in, you might be viewing the data for the patient, which is Macy Lucas. So you can always get a reference to where you are on the dashboard just by looking in the upper left-hand corner. As I mentioned, one of the very first surveys that you'll do after you complete the sharing survey and consent is health and development survey. And this is what I described as that head to toe survey. What you're looking at right now is the dashboard. You can always come back here and see what surveys you haven't started yet. And then you can also, there's a tab for what surveys you've already completed. You also notice too, we provide a very generous time span. Most people find that it takes about a third of the time that we've estimated here to complete a survey. And then you also see the number of questions in that particular survey. So if you literally have, 5 minutes because you're in line at a grocery store, you could literally knock off a survey with 2 questions. So so you can get a good sense of, or if you have a bigger block of time, you want to sit down and work on multiple surveys, you can too. But what's most important is you do that health and development first, because that will then serve up to you other level 2 surveys that'll be relevant to you. So as I mentioned, this is an example of the health and development survey. Have you had issues with eyes or vision? If you answer yes, or if you answer, the next one is about sleep issues. If you answered unsure, a level 2 survey would be made available to you. And then switching over, within health and development, we ask about genetic reports, and if you have a genetic report that you can upload. When you get looking back at that dashboard, the left-hand column had a place for documents where you can upload a genetic report. Again, when you upload that genetic report, we de-identify all the data. So we have geneticists that basically work with this information and know how to do this properly, and then they link that data back to your RareX data. And then so after you've done your health and development, after you've uploaded your genetic report, then you start getting into the level 2 surveys. So here's several based upon this patient, Sylvie Youngston, that were served up to her. She had some asking, because she said there were issues with hearing or vision or kidney, she was served up these other surveys. This is a level 2 survey. So then it'll get more specific. It'll get more, okay, you said you had vision issues. Were there eye movement issues? And then it'll even ask you when the system first appeared in the age of the patient, and then when it was diagnosed. And this will do that for, these are all examples of vision. Now, if you're a little unsure of the timing of when the symptoms first appeared, that's fine, answer unsure. If you're even unsure of that, say in this case, visual impairment is happening, you can answer that too. And the levels, you could still have an opportunity if a researcher is looking to do some research in particular with that particular symptom, you could still get involved in that. Within every level 2 survey, then there's an option where it's free-form text. So if there are other additional issues, or if there's in that particular system or domain of the body, you don't feel something that was covered, you can feel free to type in other aspects to the symptoms that you'd like. After you've completed a survey, it'll go into the completed tab. And again, so you always have a sense of where you are. And you can always go back and view a survey that you've done. You can go back and edit a past survey that you've done. And also too, that there's that email option. So if you filled out a survey and thought, this actually might be helpful for my clinician to kind of see how I filled this out, you can actually send a copy back to yourself, and you can actually take it into your clinician and share it with them. This actually relates more to the community page, that first front door I talked about. There's a whole frequently asked questions at the bottom of that page that does have some ability for translation if you need. So that's really it. That's kind of the getting you into the data collection platform and getting you started on doing the surveys. And once you kind of jump in and do it, it does start to flow, and it's faster than what I'm kind of going through here. I'm going to pause here because I see there's some chat. See if there's particular questions.
I think it's just me, Tom, but okay.
Okay, your answer. My grade.
No, defining things and, again, like why certain things are important. But I can tell you, so Terry and I have both I've already completed our survey. So that's part, of going with Rare X is they have, participants kind of walk through the process ahead of time. So we've already done the surveys for our kids. So I did it for Rory Bell, and then Terry did it, of course, for Grady. So we've gone through the head to toe survey and the second surveys. Tom, I know we had talked about there were new development surveys coming up, or quality of life surveys. Are
There
those
are.
released yet? Because
Yeah.
I don't want to have them do things that
Yeah.
are being replaced.
The quality of life, yeah, there's new ones still coming out, but every other survey, they can definitely just go ahead and do. There are more surveys coming, though. So at the end of December, there are 5 more neurological surveys coming out. And those are very important because, and I'll get into it, but we're doing a hackathon or an open science data challenge that some of that data is going to feed.
Yep.
And shortly on the back end of, I think, January, then after those 5 come out, I believe probably another 8 to 9 surveys will be happening in January. So we're always adding new surveys. And you might find too, and some patients get on with this and they really want to answer very, very specific questions about their particular rare disease. RareX approaches it more from a head to toe first, because what you've probably have found and what a lot of rare diseases find is just through anecdotal conversations on Facebook of, oh gosh, my child's having a problem with GI issues or sleep issues. And sometimes those particular symptoms aren't even in the description of that particular rare disease or a phenotype. So that's why we do the whole head to toe, because in fact, that's already, ironically, that's already happened with one of our early groups, that a researcher had discovered oral health issues were popping up on their surveys, and she's trying to write the guidelines for kind of diagnosis, and that was never in the guidelines in the past, oral health issues. So so that's why we do head to toe. Down the line, the system has the ability to have very specific surveys for a particular disease, but this is the way we start, and it just gets more in depth as time goes on, as we add more. And I mentioned too, our basically our support from pharma. Sometimes a pharmaceutical company will be working on certain treatments in the neurological space, and they'll actually help fund a bunch of surveys in that space, while another pharma might be working on research in the autoimmune space. So they'll fund a bunch of surveys that are autoimmune based. So that's how we can just build this over time and everyone benefits.
So going back to this hackathon or sort of expanded research participation, so that is something, so this is we are participating in that. So the NARS1 disease is participating in this. So it's essentially, open to the world. And Stephanie is aware of this as well. And this will allow, more researchers to gain access and come up with sort of innovative ideas and approaches to, the disease. So, shortening the diagnostic odyssey, obviously, like, Nancy and Roxana, you both have talked about this, like in relationship to your son, right? Sons. So, unrecognized symptoms, all of the sort of things that we need, again, because we're a very small community and there's a lot to be found out about NARS1. And so that's another reason for us why it's so important. And some of the surveys that will be coming are very specific to neurodevelopmental diseases, so very specific to the symptoms that our kids might display.
Yeah, and I can say in general from going through the surveys, it definitely did not take as long as the time that they allotted. I think I could do all of them in like an hour or less, but I definitely had to like go back into them and relook at them if there were things that I was like, I'm not sure if I thought about that right, or did I answer that correctly, or I forgot to write something about like the head and then type in microcephaly because that wasn't an option. So I think having a couple sets of eyes on it, or trying to do it once and then coming back to it to make sure you didn't like miss or forget anything is really helpful too.
And I think the genetic report upload, it is not, you have to physically do that. So like once you check those buttons that Tom described about, do you have the report? And is it available? Like once you complete that, once you finish that piece of the survey, to go into the document section and upload your genetic report, is really important, because it's easy to forget about it when you start getting the other surveys done. So, and again, the genetic report, they need to have time in the Rare X side to be able to translate that information, to remove all of the personal information, to make sure that the particular variant is entered correctly, and then to make that accessible, to Stephanie and other eyes. So that's the one thing we want to make sure that everybody, also recognizes and understands, because it's not in your face more than once. Okay,
Yeah, and
so
I'll also say we went through it, right? And then Kit has scrubbed through it with Rachel as well. So we're here to help you guys if you want help going through it. If you have questions about how you answered something or how we answered something, I'd say we're all in this together. So feel free to message us, email us, like ask any questions as you're going through. There were a lot of terms I didn't even know what they meant, and I had to look them up myself, not having a scientific background. And so we will do the best we can, but honestly, our goal is just to get as many people to fill out the surveys as possible. And so however we need to get that done, we are willing to help you guys.
Yeah, in relation to that too, especially the genetic report. So we're doing this open science data challenge. It's called Accelerated Rare. It's going to be open to researchers in sort of the or even April timeframe. And it'll be several months. It's not going to be like one of those hackathons where everybody gets into a room for a weekend and just goes at it. There's grant money, there's prizes. We're going to be using, and the FDA is going to help send out and promote it to their list of thousands of researchers. We have other, literally we're going to be sending out information to thousands of researchers to participate. But some important deadlines regarding it is on January 15th will be the cutoff for any genetic reports that you are loading, just to allow us time to de-identify the data in that. And then Rare Disease Day is the cutoff for finishing surveys. Open Science Data Challenge, Rare Disease Days is February 28th. So, I encourage you to get data in sooner, because what'll be happening is even, as I said, at the end of this month, more level 2 surveys will be coming up. And so if you get more done early, then as new surveys come up, it'll just be easier to do. I just want to talk really quickly about just how some groups are using the data. So this is a group, WSS, they're a rare disease group, and they just recently had a conference. Now they, I think right now, I think they set a goal and said, hey, for this conference, we want to be able to have some data to report back to you. So they really pushed their group. And I think right now they're actually over 100, but at the time, they were able to show their group, of the people who are filling out these survey of the patients or caregivers who are filling out the surveys, they're starting to see, patterns, right? And obviously symptoms or phenotypes that are very common to that condition. But then as an example is, they did parent stories of these things, because then they were able to say, gosh, I wish I knew that 19% of our community, at least who did these surveys, have seizures. And then they could actually take that information to their clinician to say, you know what, I think what was happening here was actually a seizure, and work with the clinician to try and diagnose that. There's other issues like, again, things like constipation. That wasn't really a known, but suddenly that bubbled to the top because people really didn't think that could possibly be connected to the particular rare disease. So that's the kind of high level data we'll provide back to Rachel and team. So that's another value that you'll have, because you'll have that to go to your doctors and clinicians with that. And as mentioned, Rachel and Derry offered to help too, but also, if ever you're stumbling with this, you can email us at support@RareX, and it might be a day or two, but somebody will get back to you and try and help you through a particular area or a survey if that's an issue. So that's it. Let me go back to chat, see if more questions are coming in, or do you have any questions? I'm just going to open it up and take it off share.
Any questions, guys?
I don't have a question as such, but Tom, thanks for taking us through that. And you've simplified what seems like a complicated process. And yeah, thanks for taking the time to bring us through it. Looking forward to getting involved and get all the details in there.
Sure. And actually, for all the researchers that are on this call too, I mean, the access for researchers will be through Terra, which is through the Broad Institute, but there's a whole RareX, basically the whole RareX database, data collection program is on there. And if you need, I can send instructions on how a researcher would access that from the back end.
Yeah, Tom, would you mind doing that and sending it to Stephanie? And then she can forward it to all of the researchers that have been involved with, our first publication. Since, as we've mentioned, we've kind of lost some of the families there in follow-up along the way.
One-page brochure on how to get into Terra and the value for researchers.
Great. Yeah, because I think that'd be great for sounds like Mohammed and maybe Joe would want to kind of look into that and even contact the patients where they've had some interaction with.
Right. Any other?
Oh.
Oh.
All right.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I'm just asking a question. I was just saying, is Joseph one of the eldest ones in the group? So would he be, obviously I'm going to have to go back a number of years for him, and obviously.
Yeah, so Nancy and Bud's kiddo James is 30. So yeah. And Tom, I will let you answer the question about that, but I feel like when we talk about those, right, so in that first level, right, where you're just kind of clicking symptoms, yeah, you can put like the date, right, where you had first noticed it or first diagnosed, which, yes, for you all, you may be thinking for a very long time on where that was. But certainly we would appreciate being able to have that information.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be interesting, because I think I've been led down quite a few different paths, and I've researched everything out of cerebral palsy and Charcot-Marie tooth, and obviously he didn't have either of those. So now I'm aboard the NARS1.
Yep.
So, but the 4 years of research have said that it's definitely what he's got. So, obviously, I'm on board. Anything we can do to help, obviously. Yeah, I'm.
Yeah, because I think that like I mentioned before, we really don't we don't have an idea what this looks like for most of our kiddos in 10 years, but we do have a little bit of a glimpse from you. Yeah. From Nancy and Bud. There's a couple other families that have some teenagers. So, I'm sure there's some I make up, there's some early signs and symptoms
Yeah.
that we've all shared, like very, very, very early on.
Yeah.
But understanding, like you said, Joseph lost his ability to walk, right? Like,
Yeah.
that's important to know, or, if like some neuropathy set on at some point, and,
Yeah.
those are things that we don't know about in our kids
Yeah.
right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think I think he would be interesting to the group, because he's come quite a long way, and things that we didn't think were relevant actually are relevant, but we never really thought of them as anything like that.
Yeah. And that's kind of been my perspective too about my daughter, is like everything that she's been through is relevant to this, because we have an understanding of maybe what the most severe, clinical symptoms could look like. So
Yeah.
that's another reason why I really have liked Rare X, because they've included patients who've passed away, which isn't always
No.
the case in other registries.
Yeah. Yeah, and the fact that I've got an older child and a younger child that are both fine as well, which is also I think, an encouragement to others.
Yes.
That might be nervous. Yeah.
So Lauren's probably chuckling a little bit right now, because no one takes worse records than me. We kid about the baby book that do not exist with my 3 kids. So I am going to be on the struggle bus big time with James. I couldn't even tell you when my kids I'll always say to Lauren, "Oh, go look at your baby book, wink wink." That was never my thing. But we will do our best. He's had a lot of stuff too. He just had his front tooth extracted. When he was saying oral health, he's always had issues with his teeth. You're really making me think. So I think this survey is going to really make me think. I'm just going to have a hard time targeting exactly when.
Well, I'll be right beside you.
I have a file this big of him, but there's no baby book.
Yes, probably stacks.
I just have a shelf.
Yeah. And I think Terry mentioned, like, sometimes it's good to enter and like come back and enter and come back. And that again is like a nice feature of this, is like, you can be like, well, that timeline isn't right. Or, oh, shoot, this, this happened. I forgot to put in that, he actually was born with a small head and it wasn't on that piece of paper, but that is that for us is is an important piece of data or information. So yeah.
We knew that right away with microcephaly with him. But as far as like even the neuropathy wasn't discovered, I would have to look back, and I knew they told us that was going to be an open door, like that was going to be the diagnosis. There was going to be something that would get him diagnosed by the severe neuropathy he had, but that wasn't until his teenage years either. But I'll have to really look and see when it was diagnosed, but I'm sure he had it since birth and it was never diagnosed.
Yeah. And those are questions that we really do not know the answer to, right? But suspect they're there. And that's where you guys, we really are relying on you two ladies.
Right. Lauren has probably had to shut her video off because she's probably hysterical. Like, this is the last person that should be.
She doesn't even remember what I told her a few hours ago this morning. So
It'll be fun.
Maybe Bug will be better.
Rachel, do you want to go just to our last slide?
Yeah.
Essence of time for people.
Yes, certainly. And Tom, you don't have to stay on for this if you don't want to. Totally up to you. We're just going to run through